Gotcha.
And we're live. Hey, everyone out there on the internet. My name is Kevin Griffin. Welcome to the Swift Kick Show. I'm here with my very special guest and probably one of my favorite people on the face of the planet, Mr. Andy Leonard. How are you, Andy?
I'm well, Kevin. Thank you for that warm introduction. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm up in Northern Virginia hanging out with some of our friends at a great little company called Inferno Red Technologies.
Okay.
I think you and I have a mutual friend, Scott Locke, who owns that company. He's letting me borrow a desk because tonight I'm speaking at Microsoft Maniacs. It's a user group in Sterling, Virginia.
Okay.
And you know, it takes me a couple hours to get up here. I don't want to have to push traffic and then try to do a webinar, and just so much effort. And I really appreciate the hospitality of the folks at Inferno Red for letting me sit here. But how are you doing, sir?
I am doing well. I'm back home. I had a couple of weeks of travel, and it's nice to be back home. It's interesting to travel, but glad to be back. And busy, which is a good thing.
Busy's always good.
Yeah, it beats the alternative.
It sure does. Although there are times that I really kind of clamor for just some downtime. It's like I wish I didn't owe anyone anything right now. But with that, you also say, well, I really don't want anyone to send me money at the moment. I need the paychecks to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Well, consulting, is that way. It is a blessing and a curse, and I often describe the whole idea of being an entrepreneur as it's an illusion. The idea that you work for yourself, you really work for a bunch of different people who do not talk to each other.
They do not.
But I also conclude that thought by saying it's a very powerful illusion, and I enjoy it for that reason.
Yes, sir. Well, let's talk more about that for a moment. I don't know if you've watched any of the previous episodes of the show, but I always like to take a couple of minutes and just talk to you a little bit about your background and where you're coming from. And then I'll let you do what you do best, and that's talk to people and just lay down some knowledge. So, Andy, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a very long time. I think we're talking maybe 10, 11 years now. It's you've been one of those mentors to me, being the fresh face in the community and helping me get my start. And that's why I said you're one of my favorite people in the world. Well, but let's let the blush just drain out of your face for a moment. I noticed our mutual friend Mike Eaton's in the chat room. He said the exact same thing on Twitter a couple of minutes ago. Wow. So but for folks who might not know who Andy Leonard is, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and also tell us your origin story. How did you get started down this crazy road of technology and software development and data, all the cool stuff that you do?
Wow. Well, first, thank both you and Mike for saying those things. Y'all are my heroes. You're out there doing some really cool stuff, and I love following you and keeping up with everything y'all do in the community. This show is just one of those things, and it's really cool. And you know this, not everybody does, but you've actually advised me on some things. So if I helped you, you've more than repaid it. So thank you for your wonderful advice.
Teach everything you know. That's my motto.
I love that. And we've had some fantastic conversations. I remember probably in the last 18 months, we had one at one of the code camps, I think, in Richmond at a speaker dinner. And I really gleaned a lot from that, Kevin. Thank you so much.
I can't wait to have a more private conversation with you to find out where you are.
Well, I put some of that into action, not nearly enough. But gosh, the history of Andy, part one. I started working with computers as a kid, and this was a long time ago, obviously, and 1975. And there weren't really personal computers. And I lived in the middle of the woods out here in Central Virginia. My neighbor moved home after retiring from the Air Force, and he did so to help take care of his elderly parents. And they were right next door. So I would hang out, and he would share with me these tidbits. He was building this computer at his house. And it was a Motorola 6800 based machine. Started out with a trainer. And at 11, I was just wildly curious. And he talked to my parents and said, would it be all right if I shared some of this information with Andy? He seems interested and keen. And so they agreed, and I learned Motorola machine code when I was 11. And then after that, we got enough memory to do BASIC on one. And man, before you know it, I was doing BASIC. And I coded primarily in BASIC for 40 years until 2015. And then I've just recently, to me, made that jump to C#. And I felt like this year I became a C# noob. I think I've worked my way up to being a noob.
We're slowly bringing you to the dark side of C#. Welcome, sir.
I'm resisting, but it's hard. But I love it. And in the middle, there was this interim where I was doing Visual Basic 6.0 in manufacturing, and this was late 90s, around 2000. And during that time, right as .NET was still kind of in testing and beta, and I remember a time where it was all command line, right? You could write it, but you had to compile it manually and all. Neat ideas, but I wasn't into it. And I became a Microsoft Certified Solutions Developer back then, before .NET. And I passed a couple of certifications in .NET early on. But it was right about that time I jumped the fence to working on a data warehouse team. I started in the reporting side. I was building reports in VB at a manufacturing facility. So it just was an easy slide over there. And I was standing closest to the server, Kevin, when they decided to move the real DBA off to some other work. And he was really good at. And they said, "You've got SQL Server on your resume. How about you do that?" That turned out to be a 1.6 terabyte data warehouse, which isn't anything small these days.
No,
but this was prior to the age of SANs, so there were literally 16 drives hanging off that box to support all that. It was huge. I was in way over my head. Like I know a lot. I've watched some of your shows, and some of your guests will say this, like it was sink or swim, and I swam. It was that sort of thing. And it just kind of grew from there. And one thing I like making the jump from being a developer to a database person is database technology at that time. This was almost 20 years ago. It was evolving, but it was really, really slow compared to software development. And both have accelerated. I've watched this happen, over the whole time since 75. It's just incredible, the amount of acceleration. But now I own and operate Enterprise Data and Analytics, which is a consulting firm. I live in Farmville. Our team's distributed all over the U.S. Occasionally, we work with people internationally. I own and operate, actually, Andy Leonard Training is the company. That's the official company, Andy Leonard Training, Inc. It does business as Enterprise Data and Analytics. It does business as Andy Leonard Consulting. And it's weird, and it's kind of a long story that doesn't really add any value to share. But the consulting business, Andy Leonard Consulting, became the kind of the shop where I do my software development, product development in. And Enterprise Data and Analytics became the consulting arm, and consulting and training. And so I do business intelligence markup language training now, BEML, and SSIS. I do a lot of work with that. My favorite thing to do these days, Kevin, it's something I spent 3 hours with a client earlier today. It's a team. They are maturing as a data warehouse team. They want to make sure they're doing things right. They want to future-proof their products as much as possible. They're just checking to see that their I's are dotted, their T's are crossed. And man, they're doing a lot of things right already, and I make sure that I point those out, give them kudos. Just a couple of things I was able to add value here and there. They're not as familiar with the SSIS catalog, and let's face it, I've taken that thing apart. So it's a great gig though, doing the kind of the mentor coach piece. And just, working with, I love people. That's how we met. I was working in community here in the Richmond area. You're down at the beach, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're kindred spirits when it comes to community. We both love community. It's just awesome stuff, and this is kind of like getting paid for doing community, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, outside of technology, what type of hobbies do you have? So Farmville, I mean, you farm, right?
I used to. So we still have a garden, and we had chickens for a long time. We had chickens for eggs, and it was great. I actually got so busy at work, I was traveling, and I was able to take my wife and one or two kids with me on trips. And so you can only ask the neighbors ever so often, can you take care of the chickens while we're gone? He gets tired of free eggs. He did a great job. He would have kept taking care of them forever. But we
on the wrong diet then if he gets tired of free eggs.
And that's the truth. Yeah, we both do that keto diet. That's pretty awesome. That's kind of a hobby. I've lost, let's see. I actually gained some weight because I blame it on the travel, but I don't think it was travel. It was just me being not disciplined. But I gained a couple pounds back. I'm hanging out around 30 pounds down. I'd lost
That's
about.
awesome.
Yeah. And I mean,
how much of that is beer that you grew back?
I wish to. Yeah. So I'll bring it in there. There we go. There it is in the camera. So that's a lot. No, I'm afraid it was me cheating on the diet, on the keto diet. But what's nice about this diet is you just start behaving again, and it just peels right back off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I go up, I go down, then I go back up, down and back up. And usually it's because of travel. If I have a busy travel season, it's just really hard to be strict. And like I've been good today. I was good yesterday. I was kind of good the day before. And it's hard to keep that rhythm going because there's always travel, and someone says, well, the only thing to eat right now is pizza. You go, well, maybe I can scrape the cheese and pepperoni off the top of it. All right, well, then I've had 10 slices of pizza in order to get a decent meal. There's all these scraps over here in the corner.
So, guilty.
I've done that.
Yeah. But I mean, you've lost weight. You've maintained a good, healthy drop. I've seen it over the years, and watching you and some of the others in the community, a lot of people in the community are doing the keto diet. It just seems to work for us, and yeah, absolutely love it. I've not really published a lot of metrics about it, but I've told people, and for me, I'm type 2 diabetic, so I was on 4 medications. I mean, my doctor was screaming at me at the beginning of this year. He says, your sugar's not down. It's just not safe. And in order for me to do my job, I'm going to have to put you on insulin unless, something changes. And that was at the beginning of the year. I go to him every quarter, and you know how the keto diet works. I mean, you drop weight fast. It's just fast. And it was, for me, it was these little plateaus that happened in 1 to 2 weeks, but I dropped like 10 pounds right away. And then it was another, about a week there, then another 10, about a week there, and then 15. So when I go to see him in the next quarter, he's amazed. He's like, you weigh less, and your blood sugar is your A1C, which is the one that counts. He says it's normal. And he was actually smiling. I got to tell you, Kevin, I've been going to this doctor for 6 years. I didn't know the man could smile. And it was, my A1C was actually normal. It was, on the high, was right on the edge, but for me, that was great. Like I said, I've been in the 30 to 35 pound range for since late April. Started March 5th. I dropped 30 pounds in about a month and a half, 2 months, and I've just been kind of maintaining, again, bouncing up and down between that. But I am now taking about a third of the medicine that I was taking. No more threats of insulin. I feel a lot better. My knees, my gosh, my knees are like, you dropped 30 pounds off of us. They're fantastic now. And I just can't say enough about it.
They say every 10 pounds you lose, that's 20 pounds off each knee. And
makes sense.
So it makes a ton of sense that if you've lost 30 pounds, that's just so much weight and force you're not putting on your knees. I have bad knees too. Yeah. And I can feel it when I'm not strict on the diet because my knees will hurt, and going up and down the stairs, it's like, I am an old man going upstairs.
You are not old. I recently had a birthday last month. I turned 55, and thinking of that, back when I was a kid, which again was a long time ago, half a century back, 55, people were in wheelchairs. They were using canes and walkers. And I couldn't do it today, but 5 years ago, I ran a half marathon. And it's just, I think it's the accumulation of a bunch of dumb little lifestyle changes. I don't mean to make light of it when I say dumb little, but it's not huge things. It's drop the soda, drop the white bread, and as much of the other bread as you can. And you're almost done with keto at that point. You add a few complex carbs, and, I have to give my wife credit. She tried the diet about a year ago. She didn't understand it. She lost a couple pounds, but then she kind of plateaued early and she didn't understand it. So she said, I'm just not going to do this right now. And she settled down at the end of the year. I think mostly because of me. She knew I needed help. I mean, type 2 diabetes will kill you. That's straight up. It will it'll take years off your life. And it's sad because I was eating myself to death. I was doing this to me. And she researched, Kevin. She put her head down and she created 12 weeks of menus for us.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. She put, awesome. Now it's, this and our listeners may not. So I'll just share, a lot of people hear that go, I want that book. It may not work for you. I mean, it probably would help, but you need to do the study. And there's some great websites online that are even free where you can figure out what'll work for you. It's kind of like a profile. You have to figure out what's going to work best for you. That's key. And a lot of the recipes are going to be the same. But she did that. We started March 5th. We stopped at the end of May, just kind of for a break. And we, it's just been awesome since then.
Absolutely. All right. We could talk about that for a whole hour.
We could.
But we have other things to talk about. That's right. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you talk about whatever's on your mind. And folks out in the chat, if you have any questions, just leave a message and I'll interrupt Andy when it's most convenient. But all right, Andy, the floor is yours. Do what you want to do.
Wow. Well, I'd like to talk about a bunch of different things. So I made this jump before from being a software developer into being a database person. And probably the first thing I'd like to share is these days that line is getting more and more blurred. I mean, I know you know this, Kevin, because you work with software. You're all in data. And database people are finding themselves all up in software. It's happening especially in things like data science. In data analytics, there's a lot of new languages out there that if you know them, you can do more and better. Things like Python, which I'm learning, I confess. I recently completed the Microsoft Professional Program for Big Data. It was a 10-course lesson taught through edX and picked up that certificate. I'm working on the others. And I know friends in the database field and the software development field that are picking up things like the data science certificate and big data and AI. And those are really interesting courses. I focus a lot on data engineering or data integration, which is a lot of the kind of the grunt work behind it. So you can think about R and these awesome engines that do beautiful graphics that will show you, how your business is doing. They'll do predictive analytics and stuff like that. Those are like, if you compared this to a house, they would be the interior decorating, the window dressings, paint, stuff like that, which is really beautiful and really important to a business. The type of work that I do, data engineering and data integration, is more like the plumbing. Not that glamorous when you look at it. And I cannot tell you why I'm drawn to that, Kevin. But even back in Visual Basic days, I was writing applications that would do data integration. I would do data acquisition and storage. In fact, I got into SQL Server because I was building I used to be an electrician and I was a contractor, but I never wired a house. I was all manufacturing. And I redesigned a control system for a big machine, a textile machine down in Clarksville, Virginia. We put in a human machine interface. It's a product called RS View. It was written by Rockwell. It worked well with Allen Bradley Programmable Logic Controllers, or PLCs. And to test this, I wanted to make sure my data acquisition would work. It was a long weekend coming up. I set all of the tags, which are little data points, to turn them all on, and I set them to the maximum resolution, collect a data point every second. So I left. That was Friday afternoon. I come back Tuesday morning, and I've got a 3 gigabyte access file. And now this was in the late 90s. So I tried to open it, and it just wasn't going to open. So I'll date myself here. I went to, I got online, and I browsed, and I opened Netscape. That's the first part of dating me. And I typed in altavista.digital.com. That was the search engine back then, you know, one of them, one of the big ones. And I put in Microsoft database. And the part of the results that came back was SQL Server. And I said, what's that? Shorten the story just a little bit. I ended up getting my hands on a not-for-resale license of SQL Server 6.5. Took it back to the plant, ran the exact same test. It passed with flying colors. I went immediately to the plant engineer and I said, you need to buy this. Get a license, because this is not for resale. We can't use this, but it passed the test. It was enough to get us over the hump. They did that. 7.0 had just been released, SQL Server 7.0, and it worked really, really well. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed that kind of work. And you know, it comes down to my latest blog post, where I said in there that, you know, my new role, one of my new roles is I'm a product manager, but I'm not really a product manager. I'm still a problem solver. I've been one, I don't know, for decades at this point. But you know, it's a lot of fun doing data work. It's very helpful, surprisingly helpful, to have a developer background, even though I feel it's pretty outdated. Like I said earlier when we were chatting, I feel like I've made it up to being a noob in C#. But at least I understand some of what the developers are going through, some of what their concerns are. When I was asked by the data warehouse team manager at the job where I stopped doing reporting and started doing database, I was asked, can you do this job? And I said, how hard is it to tell developers no? That's a true story. So,
and you make them go crazy. They're like, they said no.
Yeah. and there's some good reasons. I was told no. And there's some good reasons why I was told no. I didn't understand it at the time, but I get it now. The part of it was limitations of the databases themselves. And I don't mean that to throw off on any of the databases, but part of that is due to design of the engine by the vendors that are selling databases. A large part of it is due to the way those designs are used to then provide a solution and store data. There's all sorts of constraints that go into how we interact with data. And I just found I liked it. I just liked it a lot. One of the things I found appealing was the velocity of change or I'll say it was a lot slower. It's picked up with the cloud. The velocity of change has picked up quite a bit, but it was, you know, I was having to learn significant changes in the late 90s and early 2000s when kind of at the end of my software development career. There were, of course, object-oriented programming had come out way before that. I remember, I want to say it was 95 or so that I picked up test-driven development. And that was a pretty big shift. That wasn't too hard for me because when I first saw it, it was called fail-first development. And I'm like, I'm doing this already. I fail all the time.
Compiling is the first unit test.
I love that. And, you know, it was awesome to see that, but it kind of got my head thinking about more about how the software is used, how it plays in the enterprise, how it plays in the, you know, that was my first introduction to SDLC, was test-driven development, software development lifecycle. And then I jumped the fence to data. And that was one of the first things I missed, is I was like, there's really not much lifecycle here. And this is, you know, 2002, 2003. And it was a little shocking. And there were people trying to solve that problem and doing some really interesting work. I jumped in and, we had a dev server that we could use, which was unusual in database worlds, at least for the teams I was working with back then, the Microsoft teams. That came out of a shop that was my last programming job. We had Oracle, and the DBA there had insisted on a test on a production server. You just need that. You need at least 3 tiers to do this kind of work. One is the old works on my machine thing, right? The reason it works on your machine is because you had to test it. You have to unit test it, and so you write it with the defaults, which is your machine. You need to deploy it to production eventually, but you don't want that to be your first deployment. You want to deploy it to some box in the middle, and then run it there so that you see that the defaults are actually pointing somewhere other than your machine. You want to make sure you move kind of the configurations, the external stuff. And that's again, a minimum of 3. I've worked in as many as 7 tiers in a life cycle. When was Medicaid. So it was Unisys, and we were doing state Medicaid data. So we had the federal people, we had SOX compliance. It was auditors lined up, to talk to us.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was doing a consultation with an insurance company, and they said the same thing. They had several tiers in between, and as soon as you started saying the tier names, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not on that project. Thank goodness.
Well, I mean, right. So you start with a local development environment, and I do most of my software development these days in SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. I've worked on some books. There's 12 books. I think 11 of them are available out at Amazon, and the one that's not is on Database Edition, and I think we sold like 2 copies of that. It was self-published. But it was changing really, really rapidly back then when we were writing on it. It used to be called Data Dude. But 11 books, easy. I can easily win that. And I'm working on a couple more right now. And, people see the books and they assume, which is a fairly valid assumption, that guy knows what he's talking about, or that lady knows what she's doing. And, you got to, so part of that is it can be misleading, because what will happen is people will see SQL Server in the title of SQL Server Integration Services, and they think, well, you're a DBA, and that's a really different job from what I do. And the truth is, I'm just not that good at being a DBA. I'm okay, but I did that role twice, Kevin, and I quit before they fired me. I'm not making that.
You're not going to optimize my indexes for me, or tell me that I'm missing keys and that sort of thing?
I can do that now, because, there's dynamic management functions and views that'll tell me exactly that. But no, you really want somebody who does this better. And there's a ton of really good folks at that. I've got some that work with me. They're really good at that. And I just take a look at this, see what you can do. It's not that I don't understand it. It's just my mind doesn't work that way. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with anyone except maybe me. I just find it's 2 really different ways of thinking about things, software development versus database administration, or really any kind of administration. I'm not good at security administration or any of that. Now, when it comes to security and SSIS, yes, I can make sure we check the boxes, dot the I's, cross the T's, because that's part of that job, keeping the data secure. It's more and more part of the job. Every day as the headlines come out. But you want, when the data, as the server goes offline for some reason, data is not available. That's a database administration thing. And can I get in there and poke around? I absolutely can. Can I fix it? Eventually, yeah. But it's not my specialty. And I know when I look at it, if it's not something I can find in 5 minutes, I'm going to call someone. I got people that are great at that. And they come in and start doing all kinds. And I usually watch, because I'm like, I learn something every time, right? But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I love having a network of smart people that I can talk to whenever I need someone smart to help me.
Isn't that cool? So yeah, I talked to you about development. I've been learning from watching your other guests on here. I love the shows on business. I got to tell you, the people that talked about being an entrepreneur and just, the teamwork and all of those, I just glom that up, man. That's awesome stuff. You have great guests.
And it's really funny, like the entrepreneurial stuff in our industry, and I say our industry, that whether it's software technology or software development, data, I mean, everything in between, there's not a big mindset towards entrepreneurship. There's the folks who say, I really should go out on my own, but they will never take that step. Right. And then there's folks like you and me who we have made that step, and now we're thinking about bigger problems. And there are problems that you would never see as a 9-to-5 employee. And there are far and few people that I can have those discussions with in the realm of software technology. And that's why I remember conversations you and I had over the past couple of years. They've been so much fun because it's my chance to talk to someone in my industry about the things that I'm trying. And are they working for me? What should I do differently? Because everything we do is just a matter of tweaking. It's like, all right, I'm going to try this thing. If that doesn't work, I'll try this thing. And if that doesn't work, I'll try this thing until you find something that hits. Like this show is a good example. I like going to user groups. I like people coming to my user group here locally. And you're up in Farmville. It's a several-hour drive for you to get down to my area, but it's pretty flexible for you to just jump on a video call for an hour. And there are so many smart people around the world where it's easy for them to just jump on a call and talk about something that they're passionate about. That's my whole thing is, what are you passionate about? And you learn so much more from those people when they're not siloed into I need to talk about this because that's my line.
Right. Well, you mentioned that. I get to talk to people the same as you. I'll mention we also have a podcast, Frank Lavinia and I, called Data Driven.
Very good podcast.
Well, thank you. Yep. Datadriven.tv. Successful beyond our wildest dreams. We've been out 15 months and I don't know, I think it was something like 65,000 downloads. It's just amazing.
Wow, that's awesome.
We had some fantastic guests though, Kevin, and I just, people Frank and I have met in the community and just interviewed over time. And we were just, it just worked out. I couldn't believe she said yes, but Dr. Rama Nema, who leads Cosmos DB at Microsoft in the cloud there, which is a fantastic tool. I mean, it was a real paradigm shift. It was an inflection point for the cloud. And she did the interview. She agreed to the interview a few months earlier, but it worked out where it's like she announced the availability of Cosmos DB, and that week she was on our show. So
you can't ask for better timing than that.
I know. And first she said yes, which was amazing. She's done several very popular keynotes at the PASS Summit, which is the big Microsoft Database Summit every year in the fall. And so, it was a huge honor to even have her on the show. And just like what you said, we're thinking along the same lines, right? It's what's behind a lot of the headlines we get the tweets, we get what the people are working on, but what's going on. And, from her, we learned that she immigrated here from Russia and she sold magazines door to door. And she was talking about how that relates to managing, Cosmos and the team there. And it just brings to mind a lot of the stuff. You and I are fans of some of the same books and authors, Simon Sinek, and his books on why, finding your why, start with why. And I think that's so important because if you're just in consulting for the money, there's probably a small percentage of people out there that'll work for, but it won't work for you and it won't work for me. There has to be something that means more than money behind it for us. So.
Don't get us wrong. The money's good.
We'll still take your money.
Absolutely. Make your checks payable to Kevin Griffin or Andy Leonard. And
but this. I mean, I've heard you talk about this enough. Even on the show, you've talked about the freedom and the flexibility. You enjoy that a lot. I value that as well. And like I said earlier, the idea of working for yourself is an illusion, but it's a powerful illusion.
I wouldn't be able to do this show if I was working a normal job, because
right.
I would have to take a long lunch break, or I'd have to make the hours up later. It's just impossible for me to do this sort of thing and work a normal job, quote normal.
Right. No, and that's just one example. I mean, if this is great that you do this, and thank you, by the way, for doing this. I'll speak for the community. I enjoy the show. I'm sure others do, and learn from it. And it's one of those things where years from now, someone's going to come up to you and say, "Now, I've been listening to your show since back when you started, and I learned this and that, and now I'm on my own." That's coming if it hasn't already. And
I've gotten that before, not particularly for this show, but for other stuff I've done.
Yeah, and it's just an amazing feeling to to have that kind of influence and to help someone, and that's a big part of what I do is why I do what I do is to be able to help people. But imagine, next week, before August ends, we're recording this in late August of 2018. I'm going to take a day, and we're going to Busch Gardens. Can you do that when you work for someone else? You can, but somebody has to approve that.
Yeah.
And it's not completely, responsibility free. I have to line that up and let my clients know I'm not available that day. But still, there's more flexibility. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. We have a couple months left before Busch Gardens closes, and my boys have been asking me to take them up. And so we're planning a couple days where I'm either going to work in the morning and take an afternoon off. It doesn't have to be an entire day. It's whatever I want it to be.
Awesome. That is awesome. Well, maybe we can coordinate.
We should have a meetup at Busch Gardens one day. That would be awesome.
That would be fun. Yeah. I keep trying to get Frank to come down, but he's from up north of where you are now, and you know what that traffic's like. It's just crazy. But yeah, he's got a couple of boys as well. And I've in my personal life, I was married before. I have 2 daughters that are grown. I have 5 grandchildren, and then I have 3 children with my wife, Christy. And so it's kind of like I've gone through this once, and I'll say this about it. I don't think it's possible to look back and go, I spent as much time as I wanted to and needed to with my kids. I just don't think that's possible. So, I kind of, having done this before and being aware of how that regret feels, and it is a regret. Could I have spent more time and done a better job as a parent the first time? Oh gosh, we don't have that kind of time to talk about all the things I did wrong. Yeah. And I'm not doing everything right now by any stretch, but it's, you kind of realize going through this again that it's a bit of a trap, and you can hedge against it a couple ways. One is by just being intentional about doing things like, taking your boys. I'm taking my kids up. Just do that. And when you do, pat yourself on the back, right? Yeah. I'm not trying to say get all braggy and, but give yourself a little credit, because the truth is we could be billing, Yeah. Not that that's more important, because it isn't. The reason we bill even is for them. But yeah, give yourself a little bit of credit. It's not easy what we're doing.
And it's also one of the things we don't talk about. If you listen to the conversation we just had, you think we're doing it for our children, but so much of it is more, it's almost just as much for me as it is for the kids.
Oh, it's a win-win.
Because the mental, when you own your own business and you're working for half a dozen other people, you have all this, you have much more responsibility, much more that you have to deal with. I have an employee, I have contractors. I worry about their livelihoods as well. Oh, and you have all this mental stress, and sometimes you just need a break from it. And the weekend's not a break. You just need a break in the middle of the week to say, I'm not going to worry about this. And it's, take care of everything, make sure everyone's taken care of, but I'm just going to step away. Mm-hmm. Specifically what I did about a month ago was I went on a mission trip in Eastern Tennessee.
Okay.
And where we were, there was no cell connection. So no laptops, no cell phones. I knew I was going there, so I warned everyone weeks in advance. We walked through contingency plans with my employee and my contractor and said, okay, if anything goes wrong, here's who you contact.
Right.
These are the 5 most common issues that we run into. Here's how you fix them. And I left and knew that no matter what happened, my clients were in good hands. My employee and contractors knew what to do. We're paid way too much to not be trusted. So trust people.
Yes.
A little bit of trust. I just forgot about everything and had a good time, helped some people out that really needed help, and just cleared my mind. Then came back and the flood just hit me. So it's hard to leave for an entire week. I was offline for 9 days.
Wow. Well, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah. I finally recovered.
Cool. That is very rewarding work to do charity type work. I find I've done a little bit of missions work as well, and it is extremely rewarding. I encourage anyone listening, especially if you're kind of sitting there scratching your head and going, God, I want to do something, but I don't know what I want to do. I read a very challenging book for me. It was called Radical. It actually sat on my Kindle for probably a year. I won't go into all of the details why, but I didn't like the subtitle. And when I read it, I was very guarded because of that. But it really revolutionized. It was kind of like a next step in my faith. And one of the things the author, David Platt, challenges folks is he says, next time, don't send your money. Go. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, okay, I'll challenge accepted. I'll do that. And I did, and it was all of the things, more than we could talk about here, but it is definitely a shift to see how other people live. I went to a different country. You went to a place. My dad lives in that area in Appalachia, in Western Virginia, and it is a whole different world out there from Farmville and from where you live.
It was the Appalachian Service Project we went and volunteered for, and it was specifically helping people in Appalachia who make their homes safer, drier, and warmer. Because there's a lot of poverty in that area.
There is.
And folks just, natural disaster stuff happens. The homes aren't safe to begin with.
Yeah.
And for the entire summer, there are multiple teams going into, I think, 20 different locations in Appalachia to help families. And
that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's a reset moment. Reset your perspective, reset your priorities. And you get these really great experiences with people who are just grateful that you're there. And you're giving, we gave 5 days of our lives to other people, and it resets you, because you come back and you're dealing with all the minutia of your daily life, whether it's family, whether it's work, and you go, it could be worse.
Oh yeah.
And so it really resets your perspective. I recommend for everyone. Yeah, even if you're not a spiritual or religious person, there's opportunities out there to help people, and you don't ours is very religious based, but you can still help people and not do devotions at the end of the day.
Right. So. Yeah, there's a lot of plans out there for that. There's a lot of neat volunteer organizations out there that are completely secular. And you get a lot of the same benefits that, we would get out of that. But I, being a person of faith, I found it, I don't know the right word. It intensified, elevated, my faith even. I got stuff out of it. I actually felt guilty about that. That was an interesting dynamic. But when I came back, I wrote a blog post called I See Poor People. When I came back from that first trip, because we flew out of Miami. We went to Honduras. And when I came back, I realized that the poor people were hiding behind uniforms. Mm-hmm. They were doing, emptying the trays in the food court and stuff like that. They're even in the airport. And it was very eye-opening. It was exactly what you said. And we get back, and it's, I kind of cringe a little bit when I hear the phrase first world problems, but
yeah,
I get it. I do get that. And you're absolutely right. Your term reset, I think, is a great term, because it did. A lot of things in my life changed after that.
I also teach a financial peace university, and I talk about this on my other podcast, Two Frugal Dudes. And one of the things we talk about is, as a part of just self-improvement and getting you and your family financially stable, aiming for financial independence. One of the things that happens when you cross this gap from having to take care of yourself to just being being financially independent and moving forward is that you start to see more opportunities to give, because you're in a position to give, or to give, to assist. So a good example is, there might be a single mom down the street who needs help paying the power bill. And you might see that, if you're a person who's not financially stable, you might see that and go, yeah, that's really too bad for her. I wish I could help. And then there's the point where it's like, well, I can help, but what if I just write a check or take a couple $100 out, put in an envelope, and stick it in her mailbox, and just say, you know what, I hope this helps you and your family. There's all these opportunities out there to help, and depending on where you are, they present themselves to you.
Absolutely.
But it's all about resetting yourself to be able to receive and see those areas that people need help in.
Well, I've read books on success, and I used to really not like books on success. I just felt that, it's just a bunch of selfish, rich people trying to tell other people, look what I've got. You don't have this, and I do.
Yep.
And I found, actually, Frank Lavinia, my co-host on Data Driven, found Grant Cardone and suggested that I listen to the 10X rule. And it really resonated. And, I don't agree with everything Grant does and says. But I get where he's coming from. And one of the points that I do agree about is exactly what you just said. He says, that he was able to organize people, and I forget the number. It was either $10 million or $100 million. He put together the events and had, invited people that he knew in his circles, and they attended and donated. And, that's just a lot of money. And it's all because he was successful and made the connections that he made. And when you look at that, there's a lot of people out there doing bad things with money and power. That's granted and a given. But some people have become, especially self-made millionaires, I think have risen to that occasion. I'm, by the way, not a self-made millionaire. I'm a self-made thousandaire.
Working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's nice to see that. And the thing is, you realize when you change your mindsets, teaching financial peace, that when you change your mind about stuff, you realize that it's not about the amount. It's about what you do with what you've been given.
Yep.
And it's an incredible way of thinking about stuff. So I highly recommend that, by the way, the Financial Peace University. It's great.
We're setting up a offering of it in our area right now. So if anyone's in Virginia Beach and they want to attend, we're on the website. But
very cool. And Kevin's an excellent teacher. I've actually sat in some of his sessions when he's presented. I know he's great. I haven't heard you deliver Dave's material, but I'm sure you do a great job.
Hey, that's the best part about it, is I don't have to present a thing. It's all DVDs. He presents it for me.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
What we do is we sit back and we do a group discussion. We moderate group discussion, and we just try to help people through the process. Because my wife and I have been doing it we took Financial Peace 9 years ago.
Wow.
I kind of lost track. But it's been a journey. A couple of folks I know in chat have taken Financial Peace as well. And it's really beneficial because it resets your mindset and sets you up on a course for success, hopefully, and very recommended.
Yep, highly recommend it.
Well, Andy, we're coming up to the end of the hour. This has been a fantastic discussion. I really like this just sit back and talk about stuff
Same here.
format. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up? Chat's been really quiet, so we're not expecting much from them.
Well, that's fine. No, not really. You know, I didn't. I had some screen sharing stuff ready, but I'm glad we didn't need to go there.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just been. It's a real blessing to be on the show. It's an honor to be on the show with you, Kevin. And I love podcasts. I am a podcaster, so I get the appeal. I hope somebody listening picked up something. If nothing else that you picked up from this conversation, no, Kevin and I are both examples of this, kind of living witnesses of you can change, you can grow, you can help. You can do other things. You can move the needle in your community, in your world. And I know Kevin's involved in a conference down there that he's done several of that. He's helped with Richmond code camps and stuff. And there's, I'm not making this up. It's a really cool feeling when somebody walks up to you, you know, at the end of one of those conferences, or maybe even years later, or maybe you just see it on Twitter. You know, I went to this and it changed my life, and now I'm doing this, and it's all because of that start. Do that.
Absolutely. That's the sole reason I run conferences still, is because you become the most popular person in the room when you're the one running the conference. And the larger, I think Revolution Conf this year was around 300 people. And
wow, that's great.
Thank you. And to have about 250 of them just come up and personally thank me throughout the 2 days of the event. That's just a fun feeling, because you get you're easier to approach. And, you know, in our industry is people are just very held back. They're not outgoing. They don't want to go start conversations. But when you're the organizer, you're much more approachable, and people are more willing to come up and say, you know, hey, thanks for everything you're doing. Then you can start a conversation and help those people kind of open up a little bit more. And it's nice to be recognized anywhere you go in life.
That is true. It's a nice little side benefit, but you know, I don't know that I know anybody in the community that's their main focus, and maybe it's because they're out there and I just don't know them. But everybody that I come in contact with these days has pretty much a servant's heart about it. They're in it for the reward we talked about, you know, having people say thanks and seeing their careers blossom.
Absolutely.
That's really what it's all about.
Well, all right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Again, thank you, Andy Leonard, for joining us today. We have a couple shows coming up over the next several weeks. We have Miss Sarah Blevins coming up next. Sarah's a great story, because I met Sarah at Codestock in Knoxville, Tennessee, several months ago. She's making the leap into software development.
Cool.
So I'm not quite sure what she did before, but she was getting into software development, and I was doing a soft skills talk at Codestock on mastermind groups. So basically surrounding yourself with like-minded people who help push you forward, whether that's in business, whether that's mentoring you career-wise, just people who have your back and have your best interests at heart. So we had a discussion there, and she told me a little bit of her story, and she's going to come on the show in a couple weeks, and she's going to talk about her journey, basically starting as a extreme newbie to software development and kind of teaching herself as she's gone, which I think teaching yourself nowadays is a much different dynamic than it was, say 20 years ago when I got started teaching myself. And it's just a different set of skills and different set of hurdles to jump over. Technology moves much faster nowadays. How do you deal with that sort of thing? So I think she's going to do a great job. I'm looking forward to chatting with her. And then a couple of weeks after that, we have Mr. Kevin Jones, who I think you might know from the Washington, D.C. area. Yep. And Kevin's going to talk about security and securing our customers, which Kevin is an extremely smart person, and his security is his main focus. So I'm really assuming we're going to learn some really good stuff in that show. But if you're in the show right now, you will get my email spam about the upcoming shows. I really appreciate you not hitting delete on those. And if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, you can sign up for notifications by going to swiftkick.in, and all of our shows are on our website now. So they're very easy to find. And you can also subscribe to us on Twitter and on YouTube. We're everywhere. We try to be everywhere. But again, thank you, Andy, and thank you to everyone in our live audience for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Kevin.